Conversations for change, because the world is ready. Absolute freedom, total responsibility. Living from the inside out. In 1997, when I first began channeling, this was the working title for the book that I wanted to write of the channeling that I had been doing for the better part of 6 months. I think about it often, and I think about the phrase absolute freedom, total responsibility. That combination of words for me is a definition, really, of what it is to live from the inside out. It's also a definition of what it is to be in a place where you take every part of what happens in your life to be your personal responsibility. There are no victims here. There are no perpetrators here. There's only you. It seems to me, and it's come to me many times over the years as I've thought about it, that this is really the only way any of us can actually be on any kind of a path towards our own awakening or enlightenment or self-awareness. That until such time as we move into a place where we take total responsibility for everything that's going on in our lives and everything that we experience, we're still in a place where we're putting something outside of ourselves that doesn't belong there. And it's a funny thing to take that on, because there are so many things that can happen in a moment, in a day, in a lifetime, that can teach us exactly the opposite. But for me, when I really come to the truth of how it is I'm trying to be in this world and what it is I think the goal is, absolute freedom and total responsibility are the two partners that have to be going side by side with me through my experience as my way of being in the world. I can't be in the world and be a free being if I'm blaming somebody else for what's happening in my experience. I can't be in the world and be a free being if I'm a victim of somebody else or something else or some other system inside of my experience of life. So that puts me right back in the same place over and over. And in the now 3 decades since I began to really dig deep and explore this idea, it has become more and more profoundly true to me the further I've come. And what I've realized the further I've come is that the other piece of the puzzle that must accompany this idea is that of profound healing. Until we get to the place where we're willing to look at and heal all of the things inside of us that keep us locked away from that which we choose and want, there is no place for us to go. There is nothing for us to do, because it's only those things inside of us, those things that make us judge ourselves, that separate us from our own well-being, that separate us from our own sense of wellness, happiness, joy, fulfillment, and all of those things. All of that comes from within us. None of it can come from outside of us. And until we know that, and until we experience that, we cannot even begin to go down any road that looks like being free. Because there is no absolute freedom if anything outside of you can disrupt that freedom. It's a hard thing to contemplate sometimes, because we're so trained in our culture to look outside of ourselves for all of the answers. And what I know from going down this road is that the only way to go down this road successfully is to look inside of ourselves for all the answers. literally every single thing we do, every decision we make has to come from within us, from that place within us that knows that we are doing the thing that we are meant to be doing based on our own internal compass. And of course, the problem is most of us don't even have an internal compass because we've spent our whole lives picking up the narratives of the world around us and putting them inside of us and calling them our own. And until we recognize that and begin to address that, there's no way for us to even get on this road. And that, I think, has been the truth of my experience for most of my life, that I have been coming up against the world full of people with narratives which they have borrowed from outside of themselves, and thinking to myself, how can I interact or communicate with these people from my own internally driven point of view? And the answer is I can't. Until we address that fundamental difference, that is, we have derived our belief systems and our narratives that we carry within us from the outside world and not from our own experiential knowledge. And this has taken me down so many side roads and alleys about experiential knowledge and people arguing about whether or not experiential knowledge is worthwhile or necessary, that it's left me just tired of the whole conversation. So I've kind of walked away from it on more than one occasion. In fact, over and over for my entire life, I think I've been picking this conversation up and walking away from it, simply because it's taken me that long to really understand that the things that are happening that are driving what's truly going on within people as they try to even contemplate these ideas are things that are exterior drivers, external points of view, which have been adopted. And I don't live from that place. I used to. For years I did when I was younger. But over the last 3 or 4 decades, I would say, I have systematically and carefully done the work of removing all of the external narratives that I don't know are true within myself from my own collection of beliefs and ascribed ideas of what I believe is true. And that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work, but it's worth doing, because when you get to the place where the things that you contemplate as true or not true within yourself line up with what you know and with your own inner work and healing work, which has allowed you to let go of the prejudices and the judgments and the internal condemnation that stops you from being able to see what is truly around you, then things begin to shift and you begin to be able to say, okay, I know who I am at this point and I understand. And interestingly enough, at the same time as that's happening, the other thing that's happening is more and more and more, you begin to let go of judgments yourself. You begin to let go of needing to have an opinion about most of the things going on in the world outside you, because you realize those things are not really relevant to you anyway. So there's no point in arguing with people about things in the outer world of what is, that you may or may not agree are the best things. The only thing that makes any sense as you move forward down this road is to be as aware, as compassionate, as loving, and as understanding as you can be from moment to moment in your interactions with every person that you meet and interact with. So it takes you out of this whole question of the push and pull, the right and wrong, the left and right, the black and white, the up and down, all those things that drive so much of what doesn't work in this world fall away, because with absolute freedom and total responsibility, it all lands back on you. There is no place where you look inside and say, oh, this is because of that, and point to something outside of yourself. That's not how it works. And that's why living from the inside out is the subtitle or subheading of that whole concept and idea. Because it requires you to start living from the inside out in order to take on that premise. And the only way you get to absolute freedom and total responsibility is if you take it on yourself and if you live from the inside out, which means you don't look outside of yourself for the answers or the opinions about what's right and what you should be doing. And in a funny way, that makes people afraid. The whole idea of thinking for yourself, of coming up with your own conclusions about everything and anything to do with your own life, makes people say, oh, that's dangerous. You shouldn't do that. Go to the doctor, get an opinion, get somebody else to tell you what it should be. There's an authority who knows better than you. But what we're discovering as we move through this world, at least what I'm discovering is, the further and further I go down this road, the more and more the truth that I am following within myself turns out to be right. It turns out that the best outcomes I can achieve happen when I'm aligning within myself, doing my own inner work, healing those things that are keeping me from being the best human being I can be in the moment, and the things that are holding me in judgment of myself. And the more I work on myself and the more I work on bringing myself into this new level of absolute freedom and total responsibility and loving being there and taking full responsibility for everything in my life, the happier I get, the stronger I get, the clearer I get, the more my actions and behaviors in the world line up with what matters to me most, the more time I spend doing the things that matter to me most, and the more I see that the contributions that I make in the world are worthwhile contributions, the more feedback I get from the people around me that I'm useful to them and that I'm helpful and that they like being around me. So, in a very funny way, if we can just be brave enough to let go of outer opinions and external points of view long enough to be true to ourselves and to go back to what we know in our hearts is true and right, the sooner we can come to a place where the life we're living is the life we're meant to be living, because it's the life that we have come to determine and discern is the right life for us. And that's all a process of experiential knowledge. Nothing else can get you that. And once you have it, nothing can take it away either. And even in the face of things happening that are unexpected, that are difficult, none of that has the power to disarm you from what your inner knowing can guide you to as the next step at any moment. And that's the power and beauty of it. There's never a point where you're left looking outside of yourself saying, oh no, now what? There's always a place where there's time for you to contemplate, ruminate, and even get in conversation with people close to you so that you can work out and figure out what it is that's coming up to be healed, or what it is that's driving you in this moment to a place of discomfort because there's something you need to look at and you haven't figured out what it is yet. But what I know is that once you get on that path of the larger self taking you where you need to go, the sky's the limit, because everything you encounter can be healed because it's all within you. And it always has been, and it always will be. And the sooner more of us understand that, the faster our progression will be into a world that works for all of us. because in a very interesting and funny and paradoxical way, the freer you become within yourself, the more freedom you give to everybody around you. And it would seem that the culture would say to us, oh no, if you give yourself that level of freedom, you must be depriving someone else. You must be doing something wrong. But the truth is exactly the opposite, because absolute freedom, total responsibility applies to everyone. As we were just talking about earlier today, that means even those people who are in discomfort, who are struggling, have the right and the freedom to be where they are in their struggle, because that struggle is what's giving them the information they need to make the next best choices for themselves. And when we deprive people of the opportunity to go through their own struggle, we deprive them of the growth they need to become who they are trying to become. And that is something we have fallen into as a way of being in our culture, I think, to a massive degree, that we don't let people suffer the natural consequences of their own choices, or reap the beautiful consequences, for that matter. Either way. Because we're so convinced that whatever it is that's within us is dangerous and has to be controlled and has to be put into some kind of container and told what to do. And exactly the opposite is true. What we need to do is set ourselves free and set each other free. Because when we do that, the world changes to the better. Always, always, always.